I think we're going to get started. People are going to continue to be admitted as we move on. Hopefully you've had a chance to take the quiz, or you've seen the quiz that popped up. One of the advantages of doing things by Zoom is you get kind of fun things like this. So as I said, my name is Sarah Porter. I'm the Executive Director of Victory Programs. Victory Programs is a Boston-based nonprofit that works with individuals and families, providing a variety of services. Pretty much nearly everyone we work with is homeless or precariously housed, many of whom are dealing with substance use disorders, which is often accompanied by other chronic health conditions, maybe HIV/AIDS or hepatitis C or mental illness. We at Victory Programs are firmly committed and believe deeply in the idea of a welcoming environment, that in a space that is providing access to a space that is staffed with compassionate and inspiring teams. When people have access to services like that or spaces like that, that's where people begin to regain their health and kind of restore their hope. And in those environments, that's where our teams start to work with people around developing as seamless of a response as possible to an array of complex and multiple and complex needs that individuals are facing. So I am thrilled to death to be here to talk about what we're calling the long road home, talking about the services we provide to homeless families, and to be here with a couple of the members of that inspiring and compassionate team. So let me start by introducing a few of them, and then we'll kind of get into part of our conversation of what we have here. Tammy Simmons-Dixon.
Hi, I'm Tammy Simmons-Dixon. I'm the Director of Victory Housing. I have had the pleasure of working at Victory Programs for 17 years now. I started off working here as the Program Director for our Revision Family Home. That was the very first program that Victory Programs merged with in terms of being able to work with families, homeless families. And my colleague I'm going to introduce to you next is Rosemary Panzner.
Hi, I'm Rose Panzner. I'm the Program Director for Revision and Chamblet Family Homes. I've worked for Victory Programs for 9 years and originally started in the role of Shelter Manager for Chamblet. And I would like to introduce Lakeisha.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lakeisha Searcy. I'm currently the Shelter Manager at Chamblet Family Home. I've held several positions with Victory for 14 years.
14 years. So I have the privilege of working with all of these women on a regular basis. And I will tell you, if I was ever in a crisis, there's nobody else I would rather have on my team than any or all of these women. They all do amazing work and are incredibly diligent, persistent, hopeful in addressing what can be a really complicated set of issues. So, plus they're also a lot of fun. Like I also really like hanging out with all of them. So, so Tammy, can you start by giving a little bit of an overview of what the family work is that we at Victory Programs do?
Sure. As I said a few seconds ago, Victory Programs formally got into the arena of working with homeless families back in 2005. And so we were at the beginning responsible for the support and advocacy for 22 families who were homeless. Most of those families at that time were very young mothers and children, so they were either pregnant or parenting, mostly infants to toddlers. And so we did the work of advocating for housing for them, thinking about like what this path to housing looks like for them. And then we have subsequently opened up an additional or sister program, which is our Chamblet Family Home. And in addition to that, we have a family shelter for women and children who are living in recovery. And so we now have about 44 women at any given time, or 44 families, I should say, at any given time that we are providing services to. 36 of those live in our traditional EA shelters, which is Chamblet and Revision Family Home. So a lot of the work that we do is working with local and state officials to talk about housing in and around Boston and across Massachusetts, actually, because as we house folks, we know that our families don't usually end up being housed in Boston. They actually end up being housed across the state. And I don't know if most of you know, or some of you know, that Massachusetts is the only state that is a right to shelter state in the country. And so we have the opportunity to ensure that children don't end up on our streets. And so families have a right to shelter. That's exactly what it means. Any family that goes into the local homeless prevention unit in their DTA office, and they are qualified for EA benefits, are guaranteed housing in the state of Massachusetts. What we do at our family shelters is we provide housing search and advocacy, as well as stabilization, which my colleague Rose will talk to you in more detail about. We also make connections with local housing authorities and also property owners to ensure that the conversation related to housing and prioritizing this population is always in the forefront of everyone. So I will leave it up to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I was going to say, thank you, Tammy. I was going to say, Rose, can you talk a little bit more? So Victory Programs operates, what we're talking about here today is 2 shelters for families who are experiencing homelessness. So can you talk a little bit more about the details of that? Like what happens in those shelters? Give us some of the mechanics of it.
Yeah, of course. So like Tammy said, between the Revision and Chamblet Family Home, we serve 36 families. Our programs are congregate shelters, which means that our families live together sharing communal spaces. They share their bathrooms, they share their kitchens, their living rooms. They do have a private bedroom, but it is for the mom or the dad and the children. So they do share that bedroom space with their own family. But I think it's really unique. Sharing these spaces allow for our families to build up support systems in their own homes. They're able to support each other by babysitting, each other's children's, maybe sharing meals together. And then in addition, we provide services. They meet with their case manager and their housing case manager weekly to work on their individual goals surrounding housing search, employment, childcare, accessing medical and mental health needs. Families also attend regularly scheduled workshops. They focus on financial literacy, housing search and education, parenting supports, and reducing risky behaviors. We also run a weekly community meeting where folks, it gives the staff the opportunity to talk with folks about program updates, events, happenings in the community, but also gives the families that we serve an opportunity to ask questions about the program, about their participation, and about compliance. Staff in the evenings and on the weekends also provide a lot of fun assistance. So we're always trying to build up engagement with our families, especially because we have the kiddos there. And so we do a lot of activities such as game nights, arts and crafts, or outings into the community. And so by putting all these services together, it's really our purpose is to increase on focusing our families' self-sufficiency. So that way, when they leave us and go into their permanent housing, they're able to stabilize their families for the long term.
That's awesome. I know that Halloween is always a big deal in the shelter. I seem to remember you personally being, kind of the winner of the Halloween costume multiple times, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So we have a video that will show you right now that helps you get a picture and a sense of exactly what these shelters look like, and sort of bring what Rose is talking about to light. So we'll pause here for a second, let you see the video, and then be back to talk a little bit more. Oh, hang on, we're having a sound issue. Pause for 1 sec. Let's go back and get the sound on. Try this again. Hang on here.
Welcome to Revision Family Home. We're going to give you a brief tour of the spaces that the clients utilize, so come along with us.
We have entered into the community living room. So, instead of them being cooped up in their room, they actually have space to kind of engage, playing games, doing housing search, watching movies. And this is a space that they're able to engage as a community.
All right, so this is their kitchen and dining room space. And so in this space, our families have all of their produce and items stored in individual cabinets, and then they all are responsible for doing their own cooking. However, a lot of our families do community engagements, and so they will, assist each other. This is where maybe they'll watch each other's kids, they'll cook for each other, and they'll hang out at the dining room table together.
Revision Family Home holds 22 families. This is an example on how the bedrooms are actually set up. There's usually a twin bed, the trundle, as well as the crib where the family's able to have their own private space.
Welcome to Revision's Play Space. We have a lot of toys for infants, toddlers, and pre-K in this space. The families can come down and use it with staff supervision. We also use this for where we have parties. When our clients are attending workshops, the kiddos can come over here and play with the volunteers from Horizons for Homeless Children called PALS, who are trained volunteers to engage and do a lot of developmental play with our children. Thank you for coming along on this tour of Revision Family Home and learning a little bit about what we do.
Awesome, thank you. So, Lakeisha, let's get into the good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about what doing our work looks like. So talk to me a little bit about what a kind of quote unquote typical family is who is experiencing homelessness and may end up in one of our family shelters.
Well, to be honest, there's no such thing as a typical family. In previous years, we would shelter families between 6 to 1 year. And depending on now the family's barriers and needs, and our program's more recent, the stay here is a whole lot more longer.
People are staying in the program longer. Okay. Correct.
2 or more years, depending on whatever their barriers or their needs actually are. In previous years, we also had single head of household, but now we're experiencing 2-parent head of household coming into our program.
So like potentially a mom and a dad and their children, or 2 moms and their children coming in. And what any of you, I mean, you all spend time in those programs. Give me a little bit, like, help paint a picture about what some of the circumstances are that have led individuals to be in the situation they're in at this point. Go ahead, Keisha, yeah.
It could be low wages. It can be possibly landlords are increasing their rent. It could be due to possible being laid off. There's just so many different reasons as to why. It could be generational poverty for some of our families. It varies.
It varies. So to reference the poll at the beginning, in Boston today, the average 2-bedroom apartment costs $3,200. That's average. And if you do the math, which I'm sure you guys do all day, every day, following kind of that standard recommendation that you're supposed to spend 30% of your income on to be able to afford an apartment, if you do that math, people would need to be bringing home $10,734 every month after taxes. And so that breaks down to making, if you're working a 40-hour week, you'd need to make $81 an hour, which I don't know anybody, certainly not many of the families that we're talking about. The average hourly wage in Boston right now is $24. So you're highlighting there's a very, very, very large gap between what people are making and what it costs to live in this city. So then, you know, what you all are doing, I like to talk about the fact that the solution to homelessness is housing. Like, there we go. So you are looking for housing and helping families. You use that expression, Lakeisha, of whatever their barriers are. So how hard is it to find housing right now?
I think if you look across Massachusetts in general, or Boston, the greater Boston area, it's extremely hard. I think if you watch the news at any given time, the constant storyline is about the cost of housing across Boston and the greater Boston area. And so when we think about our families that are out there, like, kind of fighting for the same housing that everyone else is fighting for, but maybe their income isn't as such where they can afford that, it's really difficult to find traditional housing for folks. So what we're looking at is we're looking at affordable housing in some cases, and we're also looking at subsidized housing. So for most of our families, subsidized housing really is the way to go. If there was a gem that we would use, it would be subsidized housing. However, what we have seen is that because of the increase in the of the expense of housing, that people who are in subsidized housing that traditionally will kind of stay there for 5 years or more or less, and then kind of move on to that next housing path in their life, they're not moving because they can't afford to move. And so that means the system now has a backup. Folks aren't moving, so folks can't move in. And so, and then subsidized housing is also not being developed. People see that all of these housing sites in Boston are coming up. Every corner that you look on, there's housing that are coming up, but those sites are really affordable housing.
Wait, so break down what that difference is. I mean, I don't know, Rose, can you tell us the difference between affordable housing and subsidized housing? What's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the housing world is really, difficult to navigate. So subsidized housing means that somebody is paying a set percentage of their income towards rent. So for example, if someone is in a 30% subsidy unit and they make $1,000 a month, they're going to pay $300 per rent. And so as their income changes, their rent is going to increase or decrease accordingly. What Tammy was talking about in terms of affordable housing is a little bit different. And so folks usually qualify for that type of housing based on their income, but instead they pay a set rate that does not fluctuate. So there are different levels of affordable housing, and they're based on the average median income. And that AMI changes based on the city or the town that the housing is available in. So an example would be that a family would qualify for a 50% AMI unit because their income is, say, between 45 and 60K a year, and their rent may be fixed at $1,700 a month. And so, both of these options and both of these types of housings are great alternatives to market rate for the families that we work with, especially when it comes to limited incomes. However, right now, subsidized units, the waiting list can be 7 to 10 years long, and affordable units can be 3 to 5 years. And especially as you get closer to the city, the wait is just even longer.
And then I think also there used to be voucher programs that were available for folks. So like MRVP vouchers and Section 8 vouchers. The wait list for Section 8 vouchers is anywhere from 15 to 25 years now. So if you literally have an infant and you get on the Section 8 wait list, your child may graduate high school before your name comes up for about to be able to access a voucher.
And so does that connect back to what you're talking about, Lakeisha, about why people are staying in shelter longer?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, does that connect because the lists are so long? Is that one of the reasons people are staying in shelter longer?
Yes, absolutely. And then on top of that, with the requirements landlords are now asking. They're asking for query checks, they're asking for credit checks, they're asking for eviction history. They're asking for applicants to make 2 to 3 times the actual rent. So it just causes, it's a weight gain with housing, a long weight gain.
So Tammy, you referenced Massachusetts as a right to shelter state, and I don't remember if you said this, but we're the only state.
We're the only state in the country.
Right. There's New York City is a right to shelter state for families, and Washington D.C. But Massachusetts is the only state, which is good and bad. Like, it's good, meaning that we don't see children on the street, and you don't see families on the street, and I don't know that I would use the word bad, but it's complicated because it means that that there's more people.
There's more people, and some people will come to Massachusetts because it is a right to shelter state, and therefore sometimes getting into the EA system, though it's a guarantee, there's sometimes even a wait there.
Right. Well, so explain what EA is. You say
that's the emergency assistance. So families are entitled to emergency assistance, and that's what we in the housing homeless business call EA. Okay. And so
keep talking. I'm sorry.
Folks can access that, and there are times where families, though there's a right to shelter, may spend the entire day in the homeless unit waiting for a placement across the state. Massachusetts has also, because it has become so inundated with families seeking shelter, that they have now moved to the model of utilizing hotels and motels again to house some of these families. There is a big push out right now for providers who have, units that are available. There is a request out that you can apply to become a provider for EA assistance. So there's a huge need. I want to say, I believe it was either January of this year was one of the highest requests for shelters that the state has had. And so as you would think, as the weather starts to break, the needs goes down, but with the cost of living and inflation and everything else, that makes it hard for the average working family. That makes it probably 10 times harder for the families that we serve. We were talking a little bit about, the length of stay. And I remember when I started Revision, we were housing families. We were turning over the shelter. And when I say turning over the shelter, I mean exiting families to housing. Twice a year, we would have like 100% housing rate. And now that is unheard of. Folks were staying in shelter literally 3 to 6 months back then. And now they're in there 2 to maybe 3 years.
Wow. So just some data points. So as of right now in Massachusetts, there's approximately 4,000 families who are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
That the state just brought on 600 what are called new units. So 600 spaces where homeless families can live. Those might be hotels, or places like us, congregate shelters. And there's an incredibly, as you referenced, Tammy, a very, very high number of families that are entering homelessness. I think the point you referenced was that in January of this year was the third largest net increase of family homelessness ever. So you're seeing more families pour into the system and less families exiting the system.
Right.
There were a couple of, somebody had asked, how old are the children? The average children, or generally speaking, how old are the kids that are living in their shelter? Or as you refer to them, Rose, the kiddos. How old are the kiddos?
So the age varies. We definitely see, specifically at Revision, our space is smaller. And so, we see smaller families. So maybe a parent and one child, maybe two. But they're usually about toddlers. I think I think the oldest child we've had at revision in a while is about 6 years old. However, Chamblet is a much different setup. It has much bigger rooms, which can accommodate large and older families. And so here we're seeing, infants, but we're also seeing 18, 19-year-olds coming in with their parents. So at any given time, it can range, through the entire up to 18.
I just want to pause here and paint the picture. So I could be a single mom living in one room with my toddler and my infant for 2 to 3 years. While I attempt to get a house that has a 10-year wait list. So understanding that, and the statistics we presented before, where's the hope? What happens here? What does it take to not only house these families, but to run these programs, to keep things going, to keep people, we could have a whole other conversation about how difficult or traumatic it is to experience homelessness as a family or as a child. But talk to me a little bit about, where are we going? What are we going to do with it? Don't all speak at once.
I think we're all waiting so we don't interrupt each other. Rose, you look like you had something to say, so I'll wait.
Yeah, I think there's multi-layers to this, right? I think there's the work that we're doing on the ground, which, I know, and Keisha and we were talking about it today. We've gotten really, really creative in how we're helping these families surpass their barriers, surpass their challenges, and, reach their goals. But I think a lot of it comes down to advocacy, and, advocating for higher wages, advocating that, rents be limited, and that has to happen for it to be sustainable for folks.
Tammy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that part of it is what is the hope? The hope is that we do see folks move out. We do see families move out. We do see that they're successfully housed. We do see that there is very low recidivism as it pertains to the families that we serve. We do see that the children are hopeful. We understand the trauma of being homeless. We understand that the parents are really stressed about it, but we also keep in mind, and I think my housing team keeps in mind, Rose and her team keeps in mind, that there has to be some fun times for the family. We can't all just work and think about the dread of the housing market. So Rose and her team, they're excellent at putting on really exciting events that even when we're doing workshops and things like that, they make it fun. They make it fun for the clients. They make the learning easier. They make it so that there's always conversations around don't give up. I always say to the clients when I'm there, I've been here 17 years. There's not one family that has been here 17 years. Now, I better be careful about saying that, right?
Right.
But you're going to move. Your path may look different, but you are going to move. And so we want to make sure that you have all the tools in your toolbox, that when you move, you do not return to the situation that you're in now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lakeisha, I want to ask you about what happens when families do move. I know that people get what are called stabilization services. What does that look like? But before that, as you were talking about attempting to create a fun environment or a safe environment, I'd like to point out that both Rose and Lakeisha are doing this conversation from the actual shelter, and both right before the cameras went live paused to lock their doors so that the kids didn't come in to say hi or greet them or whatever. I'm sure the minute we're done, you're going to unlock your doors and those kids will be back in to jibber jabber and talk about what they're talking. But in the meantime, you had to, create a little bit of space. Lakeisha, talk a little bit about what happens when a family moves in. Tammy talks about doing everything we can to keep that family from coming back into homelessness. What do we do to make that happen?
As far as the stabilization goes, we make sure that we meet with them once a month, once they move out, making sure that they're paying their rent, making sure that we're actually building relationships with the landlord so that landlord has an open communication with the program, making sure that the family is still meeting and making sure that they're budgeting correctly and making sure that they're still working and trying to increase their income if they're able to increase their income. If possibly subsidized housing comes in for them, to actually assist them in transitioning into their subsidized housing as well.
So we had a question about, who owns the units that people are moving into. You have, subsidized units and affordable units, and, units can be owned by private landlords, or are they owned by the state, or is it,
It's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of everything. So we work with private landlords as well as housing authorities, as well as private property owners, larger agencies like Peabody, Maloney, Cruz, you name it. We have relationships with them. We get to know who sits in those rental offices, who are the property managers, and Rose and Lakeisha is like the best advocator ever. She's kind of quiet on this call, but she is like a pit bull on fire when it's time to move people out of there. I think, in the 14 years that I've known her, she's helped to house literally hundreds of families.
It's amazing.
And so you have to know everybody who sits in those chairs, so that you can say, because there are multiple shelters in our region, and so everybody's going after that same housing that's those one or two availabilities that happen. And so what we do is we make sure that we're teaching our clients, our residents, their rights as well as their responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
What it means to be a good neighbor, what it means to get involved in your community. We talk every year about voting and why that's important, and how that's going to help you and everybody else that's coming behind you in the long run. So there's a lot of that happens to ensure that we don't see recidivism between the families that we work with. And this team is like, they do really outstanding work in ensuring that folks that get housed stay housed.
Stay housed. That feels really good. Once you do the really hard work of finding the place, we want to make sure that our folks are staying there as long as they possibly can. A question came in asking, are there incentives for private landlords or property managers to offer affordable housing or subsidize, like to house families who are exiting homelessness?
There's been a lot of conversations about landlord incentives, and it's been mostly conversational. I know last year we had talked about potentially like what are some of the things that we do. So DHCD has been talking, the Department of Housing and Community Development has been talking about a plan to ensure that we take the stress off the landlords around property damage or things of that nature, around evictions, and that's why we've increased the stabilization. Lakeisha talked about the stabilization, but part of what we do also is that we do mediation, so that the landlord knows that they're not going to be alone to deal with this client, and that they hopefully are not, if we do stabilization well, would not incur debt in terms of having to go in and evict families. So how do we make sure resources are put in place to help families if their housing becomes unstable to stabilize it again? And that's been really good. And that's how we've been able to also house folks. So as folks move out into more traditional housing that have housing dollars attached to it while they're waiting on subsidized housing, that what we do is we talk to the landlords about, okay, we're going to be that kind of buffer. If anything happens, we want you to talk to us. And we also inform the residents that we want you guys to talk to us about what's going on, so that we can be proactive instead of reactive. And the landlords really appreciate that.
Yeah, they really do. I've witnessed that quite a few times with both individuals and families, when the landlords actually see that the case manager or whoever the individual is actually really active and working with them as well as the family. It's like a different level of respect. And what also happens is that it opens more doors and possibly housing some of the rest of our families as well.
Yes, because we get referrals and they say this Victory program is really good. they're going to be there every step of the way. I have a friend that has a 3-unit apartment. Are you guys interested in renting to them? And they usually connect us in that way also.
So that means, just to clarify, so, you're working with families while they're in the shelter, and you finally get the housing, families get the housing, they get moved in, they stabilize, but yet they could maintain a relationship with you.
Yes.
For how long?
So we formally work with them for 2 years, but
yeah,
okay,
2 years. But Tammy always says this to me. I always say it. Once a client, always a client. And so if somebody needs assistance, we are never going to turn our doors, turn away, close our doors, anything like that. We'll always, walk them through.
Yeah.
Because you want to keep people housed. Also, at that point, you may have known some of these families for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So you have a pretty deep connection, to I don't know, you probably feel deeply, deeply invested in stabilizing them. Talk a little bit about, I've heard you say a couple different times about people getting jobs or increasing their income or things like that. What does that look like? What kind of jobs are families getting? How are people, what has that changed sort of in the day and age of COVID? But what are the other aspects of their life besides just housing?
Yeah, so of course, we see families getting all different types of jobs. Folks come in with a lot of different skill sets. Usually what we're trying to do is first establish, okay, have they received their GED? Have they, do they want to go to higher learning? Do they want to enroll in like a certificate program that's a short-term program that can give them a really qualified, higher paying wage, a skill? And some of our folks come in with these really amazing tactile skills. I see some of them, like they have Instagrams full of all the makeup that they do, the hairstyles that they do, and they don't even realize that that's a skill set that is very much needed and wanted. And so, we're really trying to work with them to figure out, like, not only what do you have to do to make money, but what do you want to do? Establishing a career. And so we partner with a lot of different programs that provide different job readiness tools. And can help connect people to the community, to finding jobs after they've completed these certificate or educational programs, such as we work with JVS, ABCD, a whole slew of them. Right now, I think we're seeing a huge trend actually in home health aid and CNA. I think it's a need that's happening a lot more, and our clients are going through those short-term programs, and they're able to make a pretty good wage doing that type of work.
Yeah, I will add to that just because, I know what you do. There's a huge number of individuals you serve who are undocumented, which adds a whole other complicated piece to that story. But there was also a story in the Boston Globe, maybe a couple months ago, that was highlighting a family who's a 2-parent family with kids that was experiencing homelessness, that their combined income together was $85,000. And they had highlighted kind of this story, which I think is, true for a lot of the families you work with, where it's not even about like living paycheck to paycheck. It's about being, I think the language they use, like one incident away from instability, like one car repair or one, medical bill or one thing, like being, even though you're making $85,000, which feels like, gosh, that's a decent wage, that could kick you over into a problem. I don't know. Do you have any reaction to any of those? Either want to talk about undocumented or folks who might coming in with jobs.
We are seeing a huge increase, and Rose and Lakeisha see this on because they're really at the shelter level. Increase in undocumented families coming in. And where we've always seen some amount of undocumented families, there are more and more undocumented families coming from every background. Yeah. So I think people think of, when we say undocumented families, unfortunately, they think of a particular set of people, but we're actually seeing it across the board from multiple different cultures. And so it's really hard that folks are coming in and what is available to them is a struggle. And I think that's where some of our creative juices have to really kick into high gear to be able to house those families and also support them and looking at their immigration status.
Yeah.
You know, we also have seen an uptick in folks coming in because of domestic violence. You know, we've seen an uptick in male heads of households. And so, and as Lakeisha said earlier, intact family, meaning a intact families, meaning a two-parent household. And so I think it's hard. And so I don't want us to think that it has one particular look.
Right.
Because homelessness has different layers and different looks.
Yeah.
And so it all depends on who's there in the moment.
But what I like about our system is that we try to figure out all those pieces when they first arrive to our program, what barriers that they have, so that way it's easier for us to kind of assist them and kind of show them places where they can follow up with, you know, immigration services, daycare services, mapped health, things of that nature.
So, Lakeisha, what would you say is your biggest challenge? Like, I mean, this work sounds in a certain way sad, like hard and sad. And talk about what it's like to do the work or what your challenges are.
Well, I feel like the biggest challenge is limited resources for some of our families that's not qualified for. We do have a couple of families that aren't able to have daycare. So with them not having daycare, it kind of eliminates them on trying to attend a job readiness program or try to look for work or even try to do something as simple as an ESOL class. I don't think our job is sad. It's more of a rewarding thing, especially when, despite of some of the challenges that we may face, how, you know, the families kind of encourage each other, as Rose and Tammy stated earlier, that they cook meals for each other, they support each other with looking after their children, how they try to encourage each other with words or even, you know, some feedback. As we was talking about earlier, you know, the children coming into the office and having whole conversations or kind of taking over the desk and wanting to draw or, you know, want to play on the phone. And it's just like just seeing them happy despite of their situation, it gives me the drive. And as Tammy explained earlier, I am a pit bull. I do advocate for our families. I like to do the behind the scenes work, but it's those children, it's those, you know, parents that kind of give you the drive on, you know, they deserve a chance out here, you know, so it's rewarding.
Tammy, you've done this for 17 years.
Yes.
Talk to me about what's the most rewarding aspect of this work for you.
I think just seeing the hope that's in the children. Like, you know, if you think about like the stigma of homelessness, you think that like there is no joy, and there is joy. I have seen the kids, they're in Rose's office because she keeps like a bowl of goodies there, and they're always going into like, Miss Rose, what do you have today? And there is just joy. The kids are playing, they're thriving. I think that we have done a really good job of ensuring that there's an environment where it's not sad all the time, that the children can be children. And so that gives us hope to keep doing the work, but it also gives the parents hope that their situation is going to change and that they see each other like moving on and progressing. I've done this work for 17 years. I've seen families go from being homeless to I've gone to college graduations, weddings. They email me all the time. I'm buying a house, Miss Tammy, and they're so happy about it. And I'm happy for them. As I say to Rose all the time, once a client, always a client. Once a Victory staff, always a Victory staff. Sometimes they do not leave me alone. And I'm okay with that, because they want to tell you about their successes, the next step, what are they doing? And it's really, it's enjoying. Like, I love that day-to-day work, and I love hearing that folks have done things. It's simple things. They come in and there's a schedule. They learn to put their kids to bed at a certain time, to take time for themselves. And so I've had moms that have said, you know, when I first came to Revision House, I hated that schedule that you guys have. I hated that Thursdays was deep cleaning. And then they go home and they're like, I play my music every Thursday and I'm cleaning my house. You know, so it's those little things that are just so rewarding, and they're so appreciative, and people come back and they give back. We have a client who was there 17 years ago that continues to come back every single year and does a whole drive and Christmas party for the families at Revision.
But I also know we have, I believe, an individual who moved out of the shelter and owns a house,
Yeah.
and now houses families leaving there, right? Like, she became the landlord and then housed another family, like
Yes.
the
Yes.
folks.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what also, I mean, just to add to that, we see families that after a bit of time, like, they come back and they work for us.
Yeah.
They work with us. And, you know, it's so inspiring for them to be able to see and take the lessons that they learned and bring them back to the families.
Or they're doing advocacy at the state house level. You know, they're pushing for housing. They're the ones that can actually, they do a better job advocating than we do, because they've had the experience. And they understand what the need is, and they understand what works and what does not work. And they're very clear and happy to tell you what works.
Well, it's interesting. I also know that, you know, the three of you walk a really fine line of giving people space for self-determination and letting people be, you know, the parents of their own family, and, you know, have some dignity and some space in a congregate setting that's really hard to have. But at the same time, offering that gentle advice around, hey, let's look at what bedtime can look like. I know there's a refrigerator that sits in the front of Revision House that's stocked with fruits and vegetables all the time, that people can go in and just take what they need or want as a way of kind of encouraging it. I don't know. You want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so I think what's really unique about Revision is that we have a farm right on site. And I mean, Tammy can definitely speak to a little bit more about the farm and the integration, but when there is produce growing on that farm, there's produce in that fridge. And so I love that. You know, and it's, you don't have to ask, you don't even have to say anything. You can just go in, you can get it. You know, and I think that families really appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's a way also that they may be trying to figure out a way how they're going to subsidize meals. And this is a way that they don't have to ask for it. It's just there. And it doesn't point the finger at you need, but it's here for everybody. Take it as you will. And they will cook for each other. And Rose also does different dinners and things like that, where we use that produce to help introduce the fresh vegetables into the daily meals of the families, all without saying, you need to add vegetables to that, Big Mac. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think it also speaks to the power of community and the fact that, those of us who are moms, a lot of us, how were we taught to be a parent? And it's by watching someone else, or, so many people had experience from grandmas or aunts or whoever that did that. And I can imagine, attempting to raise a family in a homeless shelter can be really complicated. And so and could probably be very isolating, having a community of other families around you or staff around you, while I don't love the idea of having to live with 21 other families, there's an advantage to that at a certain point. Todd, we're running out of time here, just really quick. So anybody can answer this, but what are some things, you just did an amazing job of painting a picture of who some of these families are, but what are things you wish people knew more about the individuals we work with, and or what are ways that people could be supportive? I don't know, Lakeisha, you want to start?
Sure. I feel like it's how resilient our families actually are, and being able to navigate through their traumas, mental health, and balancing having to take care of their kids, attending school, job readiness programs, working, attending on-site workshops, case management, housing, because I know for me, if I had all those things going on, there's no way. But they push for greatness. And I wish people would just know that they do push and they do strive for greatness.
Good for you. Yeah. Rose?
Well, so I think, asking about ways that people can help. I think that, there's tons of ways that people can help. I talked a little bit about general advocacy. So advocacy at the city and state level, higher wages, more affordable housing. But I think, in terms of victory programs, financial donations are always a great way to support the organization. We have an Amazon wish list online, volunteer opportunities at the farm, at the Boston Live-In Center, to even do translation with some of our families. All those opportunities can be found on the website, and those smaller things can go a really long way.
Absolutely. Tammy, you want to add to any of that about what you wish people knew or how people can help?
I think Lakeisha hit it on the head of what I would wish people know, that the families are very resilient, and that this is just a point in time in their lives. And I think you said it, Sarah, that like a lot of people are, and not just the people that we deal with, are just one tragedy away from maybe having to experience this. And so to just always keep that in the back of your mind, because if it's not you, it's probably someone that you know. And so think about, what would you want for your loved one or that person that you know? What type of services would you want available for them? So always keeping that in mind and thinking about, wow, how really close that is, because I don't think people understand how close a great portion of the United States population is just one tragedy away from, or one circumstance away from having to experience it.
Yeah. Does anyone want to add a final thought about what we do or how we do it, or, our family work? And I don't want you to get left with that one last thought in your head that you really wanted to get out. No?
I think we did such a great job. I'm just I'm gonna say it. No, and I'm starting to hear the kids knock on my door. So
it's interesting. Obviously the position I sit in, I am very proud of the work that Victory Programs does on a daily basis across all of our services. We serve over 5,000 people a year, and many of those people, we serve them multiple times. They touch our agency every day for 365 days for multiple years in a row. But listening to you talk, the three of you talk, with the dignity that you hold for these families, with the belief that you have, the way that you kind of work with people to hold on to hope and inspire persistence and resilience. Tammy, you said, like, the idea of saying you will be housed, like it will happen. And I'm super proud of that work that you do, and grateful for the fact that we're able to offer this. So to those of you who joined us to listen, I hope you learned a little bit about what we do. I hope you feel equal parts inspired by what we do, and that there's a little bit of reality of what this looks like, or of what these services can look like in our city and our state, just to make you think a little bit. So thank you to those of you who partner with us, to those of you who support you. Thank you to Tammy and Rose and Lakeisha for all the hard work you do. We appreciate those of you who joined us today. We appreciate the three of you. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.